This is the Puck Junk Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Puck Junk Hockey Podcast. I'm Sal Berry, and with me is Clemente Lisi. And today we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff because it is the new NHL season. So this is kind of like our quasi NHL season preview episode, though no, we are not going to get into 32 different thoughts, 32 different teams, 32 different whatever, because I ain't got time for that. I ain't got the mental bandwidth for that. I don't got the capacity for that, but we're going to talk about a few things, including Jeremy Swayman signing a monster contract, Connor Bedard signing a different kind of contract, some theft, because you got to have a good crime story in here as well, and a few other odds and ends as we round out the show. So, Clemente, how have you been? It's been over a week, I know, since our last show. So, what's the latest and the greatest?
All good. Trying to survive what is the busiest sports month of the year. I always think March is kind of a big thing because of March Madness, but between the startup of hockey and then you have the NBA starting up soon, you have the playoffs in baseball, there's football, whatever. It's a lot going on. But I live in New York, so the air is getting a little crisper, it's getting a little cooler, and hockey's starting, so it's starting to feel like I got to tell you, I'm not a winter person. I hate winter. And I find hockey to be the only really big coping mechanism for winter, because it's like if I'm going to be inside, then there's hockey to watch, and that's always kind of fun, as opposed to, it was weird during the pandemic where hockey was in the summer. That was really weird for me.
That was weird. That was also fun, but yeah, hockey's a great excuse to stay indoors during the winter time.
Absolutely.
I mean, when I was a kid, I liked skating outdoors. Oh, because it was skating, so any skating was good skating. But yeah, I agree with you there. Last week we didn't do a show because a couple of things were going on. One is that we were having some electrical work done in the house. So I knew that I was going to be without power, not for the full days, but like the end of last week when I tend to do my editing. I wasn't going to have power for long stretches of the day. So I'm like, all right, well, that's kind of pointless because no power, no computer, no editing. And then the other thing is I got my latest COVID booster, and I actually got that around the same time as I knew I was going to have electrical work, so that if I was like groggy or drowsy or sore, or tired or whatever, I wouldn't feel like doing computer work anyway. So it was kind of like, all right, I'm going to have this electrical downtime. So I'm going to have some physical downtime as well.
Those are good points. One, you should have just said that we were upgrading the studio. You could have just said that, the recording studio. And then second of all, speaking of shots, I feel like a dog. I have to get my shots too before the expo, which is in 30 days and counting now, something like that. It's less than,
oh my God.
It's less than a month, about a month to go. So.
Yeah, the expo's my light at the end of the tunnel, because right now I got a heavier course load.
Yeah.
We're both, Clemente and I are both college teachers, college professors, I guess you could call us. And I got a heavier than usual workload. I kind of was given a class last minute, so I'm spending a lot of my time learning the material for this class that I am in turn teaching, which is fine because, teachers are learners. We're lifelong learners. So if we can teach, we can learn. It goes with the territory. If you had a bad teacher, I bet they were a bad learner as well. But anyway, so that's like the light at the end of my tunnel is like, oh yeah, like just as like final projects are going to start rolling in, I'm going to be going to Toronto. So that's going to be such a release for me. But yeah, I didn't want to obviously get COVID and not be able to go to Toronto. So that's why I got the vaccine, a month before leaving, so that it would be fully vested or whatever the medical term is for it. But yeah, exciting.
We're putting those vaccines to the test at the expo for sure. Any public event with that many people in it is always, you want to have all your shields up, like in Star Wars, right? Or Star Trek. I'm sorry. You want to have the shields up just in case, because, people are inside, it's winter time, and look, people get sick anyway. If you got a cold, it's very possible to happen in the wintertime. So we want to be fully inoculated as much as we can, and then we'll give those vaccines a run for their money at the expo, where thousands of people show up. So
Well, my metaphor for getting the COVID vaccine is like in Super Mario Brothers when you get that star and you're invincible for like 30
Yeah,
seconds, da, da, da,
yeah,
da, da, da,
yeah.
da, da, right? And you're knocking into all the enemies and stuff, and they're just like bouncing off of you. Like that's kind of how I feel
Yeah.
about it. It lasts
Oh,
for a couple months and
right.
then it doesn't. So anyway, and I found that out the hard way because I got my vaccine last October. I was great, and then I got COVID in January, and I'm like, what? Like, I just got the vaccine 3
Yeah.
months ago, and now I'm positive for COVID. But anyway, so I want to talk about this Connor Bedard deal with Fanatics. So he has signed with Fanatics, officially licensed everything, as they call themselves, or a Fanatics experience, to sign memorabilia for them. So this does not extend to trading cards, meaning Bedard can still sign cards for Upper Deck, but the signed jerseys, the signed pucks. Signed jerseys, we're looking at about $900 each on the Fanatics website. Signed pucks, like 550, 600. Signed photos, around $600. So you're looking at that, it's like everything. I didn't look that hard, but it seems to be in like that $600 to $1,000 neighborhood, depending on what it is. Obviously, that's not great news for Upper Deck because, yes, they can't include signed cards in packs of whatever, but, they can't like put a signed Bedard jersey, say, in like a product like Monumental. So, Monumental is like when they sell you this big box of memorabilia and it's like 3 or 4, I don't know how many because I've never seriously thought about buying one. They always sell them at the shows, and like imagine like I just got a new microwave. So like this that size that your microwave comes in. You get 1,000-watt microwave. It comes in this big box, right? That's what they sell you. They sell you this big box, and it has like 3 or 4 signed memorabilia pieces, like a signed jersey or signed golf shoes from whatever golfer. It could be Tiger Woods, could be somebody else. So they throw all this stuff in a box and sell it to you for $1,000 or whatever. And so yeah, they can't sell that stuff with Bedard's signature because Fanatics has his rights.
Yeah, no, that's correct. I think people were confused when they saw the announcement last week. They thought, "Oh, is he leaving Upper Deck?" No. So he still signs Upper Deck trading cards. Look, Fanatics doesn't really care about trading card autographs because they don't manufacture them. Would they have liked to create some kind of, card and have them sign them? Sure, but they would not be licensed. So, Fanatics really cares about a big part of their business is memorabilia, jerseys, and pucks and sticks. That's the big part of it. I think it's a net loss for Upper Deck because Upper Deck cards are a big part of their business, but they also have this gigantic autograph part of it. And if you've ever been to the Expo or even the National, they have this huge pavilion usually with all these great photos of Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods and Wayne Gretzky, and they're all signed and everything. And the autograph business is growing for them. They want to sign more people, more athletes going forward, and not being able to get him or lock him in earlier makes me think that a lot of athletes, I'm including a lot of other ones that have deals with Fanatics, including Austin Matthews and some others, makes me think that players are holding out, not just basketball and baseball, but even hockey players are holding out. I'm sure Upper Deck is making an offer. And I think a lot of them are saying, we're going to wait a little bit. And it was only a matter of time before Fanatics swooped in. I can't believe it took them this long. They swooped in and got Bedard under contract with them. The argument still is these are high end products. I mean, a jersey $800, pucks $550. This is not cheap stuff, but it's a big get, as I say, for Fanatics for sure. And not surprising, Fanatics has deep pockets, and that stable of athletes keeps growing and growing, bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think I did a story over the summer about how Upper Deck is trying to grow the autograph business, and certainly this doesn't help when you have hockey players, big name hockey players, going to Fanatics when that should be Upper Deck's domain.
Well, and you've seen at the expo, at the fall expo, probably at the national as well, if I remember correctly. But Upper Deck, part of their booth, they got this huge canvas banner of Connor Bedard. And so, I mean, they're really pushing, they were really pushing the fact that they were going to have his cards in product even before they could technically have cards in in their products. Like, remember, like the fall expo, the only card that was out was that Easter egg card, right? And yet Upper Deck had this giant, and I mean giant, like a 10-foot wide, maybe 10-foot tall, or maybe wider, but like a huge banner, right? Just standing with Bedard's picture on it, and promoting the fact that, like, hey, we're gonna have his cards in our product, right? So yeah, I mean, I think, like, if you think you have something to gain, you wait and see, right? Yeah, Bedard could have signed an exclusive with Upper Deck a year ago, but maybe his agent told him, hey, you might really win Rookie of the Year. Wait and see, because then your asking price goes up, right? And and he won Rookie of the Year, and then he signs with Fanatics. So the timing, yeah, I mean, obviously it's good to, like, lock him up as soon as you can. That is kind of a blow for Upper Deck.
Yeah, they make the announcement right on the eve of a new season ahead of Christmas, so the timing is perfect for Fanatics. So absolutely, I totally agree with you. And you're right. A year later, his stock went up. He's definitely worth more. And if you have the money, knock yourself out and buy a jersey or an autographed puck. But it's pretty high end, in my opinion.
Speaking of Upper Deck, so there was a story recently that an employee who worked for Upper Deck, I guess in their would that be not QA, but it'd be their maybe QA, but
Yeah,
redemptions, right? The
yeah,
customer
yeah.
service, that's it, right? So basically they had this person who I believe they hired in April of 24. So pretty recent hire. And this person stole, like, what was it, like $500,000 worth
Yeah, it's half a million worth of hundreds of trading cards.
of redemption cards. So these are people, this is like when you get a redemption card, you scratch off the little scratch off area, you type in the code and it says, congratulations, you are going to get a card autographed by this player. You will, receive it in 10 to 14 weeks, blah blah blah. And then, like, this person was basically just taking these cards home in their backpack or in whatever bag they brought with them to work
Right.
that day. Like, if I remember the story
No,
correctly.
that's correct, and it's interesting because I know people in the past. I've known people in my life who worked at like high end jewelry stores, or and I don't want to make this conversation about retail, but if you work at a high end jewelry store, they check your bag every night when you leave because anybody can walk out with one item, one piece, and the fact that he was
Right.
able to from the early onset, which makes me wonder if he ever got the job just for that, or he found himself surrounded by such high priced items. He thought, "Oh, this will be easy." And we all know the thing with redemptions. People claim they don't get them. Maybe they get lost in the mail. I think this person thought this will take a while for them to catch me, or maybe they'll never figure it out because we can just blame it on somebody else. I think, but with everybody who steals, they went too far and they got caught, and now Upper Deck wants to be made whole. They want a civil jury trial. They want their money, and they want to stop this person from continuing to make a profit off these cards. So if you're waiting for an Upper Deck redemption and you never got one, this could be what happened to it. In addition to the fact that I think as a result of this, I'm sure Upper Deck and even maybe Topps Fanatics, if they don't already do so, will have stricter rules and maybe more cameras and maybe just better internal security. Because if you think about it, these cards are worth a lot of money, and some of these employees, you can't go on the honor system all the time, right? I mean, these are high, it's like you were dealing with
Right.
diamonds. I'm sure you have cameras on these people. You wouldn't just say, I hope they don't steal. And inevitably this happened. I actually can't believe this hasn't happened. And maybe it's happened in the past and they never figured it out. But this was just a huge sum of money. It doesn't say how many cards, but if that's the estimated value, I have to wonder that's a good number of cards if it's $500,000. So yeah, it was a big story. And theft in the hobby, whether it's happening at shows, card shop, at the actual manufacturer, is nothing new. We've talked about that on the podcast before. We read about it all the time in the hobby, and as cards gain popularity and they're worth more, I think there's more people out there that are, not good actors who are looking to steal and make a buck.
Yeah, a funny thing is like, you go, I don't understand how this could happen. Like, you go to Starbucks, and if you try to pay with a $50 bill, they have to get a manager's approval, right? I mean, or like, I think about this. This is like one of those, like, coulda, shoulda, woulda, but like, like when you're in high school or college and you want to have a cool job, and I've had a couple of cool jobs, but, like, I wanted to work at a record store back when, well, this was CDs by then, but, I wanted to work at the music store. and they wanted to hire me, but they couldn't because my sister was already working there. And they're like, well, we can't have two people from the same family working for the same location because you might collude together and
Right.
steal, right? Like, and I was just like, really? You're so worried that, like, I don't know. I was just like, I mean, that was like the official reason, though. What guy in his 20s wouldn't want to work at the record store, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, but your little sister works there, so you can't also work
As if
there.
as if you
So,
couldn't do that with a
um,
friend. You couldn't collude with a friend, but only a relative.
probably be easier to collude with a friend than a
I
relative,
mean, yeah, we
honestly.
all have
But
relatives. We don't get along with them. No, I'm kidding. But no, but the truth is that we live in an age where there's cameras everywhere, and technology is way better than it was 10, 20 years ago. So there really is no excuse for this. I mean, it's like working in a bank. Bank tellers have
yes,
cameras on. I mean,
exactly.
the bank doesn't say, we think the tellers are good people. They're probably not going to steal from us. They don't do that. They have cameras everywhere because human nature, and you want to have security, and even just having the cameras there, even if half of them don't work, you don't know that. And so, look, I have to suspect that because Upper Deck doesn't want to go to court and pay for lawyers, they could have bought a great security system, which I'm sure they will implement now, and going forward, this probably will not happen. But my first thought was, oh no, if you have a redemption out there, you never got it, you may never get it. And there's no way for them to really know who and what, because those cards could be gone. They could be resold. Who knows where they are? And who knows how many of them he was able to sell off. So yeah, it's quite a headline, and just sort of shows another vulnerability in the hobby. There's so many of them, and the more and more you read about the hobby, the more you realize it's a great family, the hobby. It's a great fraternity. There's some people out there that are not good, and that's just the way human nature is.
Yeah, I mean, and this has always been a thing, but we're seeing it more and more
Yeah.
now, like more card shops being
Right.
broken into and like certain things stolen, or like that big theft at the Dallas
Right.
card show, or like just the extra cameras that we see, or even like more security personnel that are being hired by like some of the high-end dealers that are, flaunting these expensive items, so like whenever there's money to be made, there's crime. And it's funny because this used to be petty cash. This used to be like, okay, even if a card sold for 1,000 or a game worn jersey sold for 5,000, I mean, this was still kind of small potatoes. But now you got things going for tens of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars in the case of like some of these very old antique pieces of game worn memorabilia. So yeah, I mean, there's, or, a case full of like graded cards at high grades and stuff. So yeah, all of a sudden this has become like serious money and not just like, oh, $5 to $5,000
Right.
kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is not the '90s and the old Beckett days. This is a different hobby.
All right, so we had hockey over the past weekend. We had that global series between the Sabres and the Devils. I'm sure it was great. I heard Jaromir Jagr dropped the puck, the ceremonial face-off puck in the first game because it was in Prague. Now, I don't know this for a fact because I wasn't able to watch the games because they were on the NHL network. And once again, I am shut out from watching a game that I want to see because the NHL put it on a network, their own network that you can only get to if you subscribe to the highest tier package. At least on my provider, which is DirecTV. So DirecTV is like $85 a month. But if you want the sports and more package, or whatever they call it, the entertainment plus package, so that you could watch local home team, in this case the Blackhawks, then it goes from 85 to 109, right? So that's a big jump in price just so you can watch, your local sports teams. And then I can get like the NASCAR channel, and like the Cubs have their own channel, and like the golf channel and all these other channels that I don't want, right? But then if I want the NHL network, then I got to pay for the next price step up. And I'm like, no, that's enough, right? So they want to be like, oh, look, we're playing in Europe and this is a big deal. And it's the official start of the NHL season, even though there's still preseason games going on, whatever, right? And then they bury it on a network that nobody can watch it on. I mean, this was at like 1 in the afternoon on a Friday. They could have totally gotten a time slot on ABC for that. I mean, they could have preempted The Young and the Restless or Dr. Phil or Dr. Phil's CBS, but or whatever daytime nonsense is on ABC at like 2 in the afternoon on a Friday. That could have been the Global Series. That would have been cool. Instead, they put it on their own network that not everybody can easily access. All right, rant over. Sorry.
No, I was gonna.
That was unscripted. The more I thought about it, the more angry
No, I was
got
gonna
about
say
it.
our NHL preview is about 3 minutes old, and it took no time to bag on the NHL and about basically what they did was what every league is doing now. Like the NFL, they have games in London. It's a big deal to hype your league globally. There's soccer leagues in Europe now. They want to have games in the US because they realize that you have a global audience. But leave it to the NHL. I totally agree with you to have a game in another place, hype it, and then you're right, put it on a place where you couldn't see. I remember I got an email from the NHL saying like the global series was starting. And I was super excited, and I scroll down and it says NHL Network, which I also don't have. And I thought, oh, 2 o'clock on a Friday, 2 o'clock Eastern. I could have like tuned in, and European soccer does very well in the afternoons in the US. Would have been super, and they played over the weekend as well. Would have been super great. And I'm like, no one is going to watch this. And I agree. Put it on ESPN. Put it on, whatever free TV, whatever you can do, because you want to expose. Because otherwise, all the NHL did was actually expose people to the NHL who were in that building in Czechia. That's it. Because the North American audience really didn't tune in, and you want to promote on both sides because it's like a traveling circus. When it goes to Europe, people there want to go, just like when they have a baseball game in London or a football game in Birmingham or whatever. But at the same time, you want people on this side of the Atlantic to get excited about the start of hockey season, and it didn't feel that way. It felt totally, lost. And I know they're going to have so the All-Star game this year. They're going to have this sort of mini tournament with 4 teams. I hope it's going to be available not just on NHL Network. It makes me think that they couldn't sell the rights to anybody, so they just dumped it on their own network, or they didn't try. And the NHL has a history of this, which is like they have a great idea, but the execution often is poor.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They have a great idea, but then they somehow bungle it between the idea and the execution, and it's something that people can't even watch, or they can watch it but it's hard to watch. Somewhere along the line it just fails, and that's too bad because like I said, I was excited about that, but no, that's okay because there's a whole lot of other hockey games going on, and I think on any given day I would not have necessarily wanted to watch the Sabres and the Devils. I could think of like 27 other teams I'd rather watch than the Sabres or the Devils.
That's part of it too. The 2 teams they picked, I'm like, you basically picked 2 teams from 2 neighboring states. I don't know that there's a big following for either team across the Atlantic, and also they don't have big stars like you would see like an Oilers team or the Rangers, the Blackhawks, like a big market. That's how I consoled myself. I'm like, I can't watch this game, but I wouldn't watch these 2 teams play anyway. So whatever, I'll move on to watching The Young and the Restless, or whatever, or whatever. Honestly, I'm not watching TV at 2 o'clock Eastern on a Friday, but I would have in this case. I would have either put it on at home on my phone, wherever. Now people are everywhere. You can get television anywhere. Screens everywhere now, so you can watch it on your phone, on your iPad. If you're home, great. If you work from home, if you work in an office, you can go to a bar, whatever. But that opportunity was kind of lost, and whatever. We have a whole season to watch, so I'm not too worried. But I agree, it could have been better, which is often the case with the NHL.
One thing you got to ask is, and this always gets asked, this is almost a trite question because it gets asked every year, and that's, will whichever team that just won the Stanley Cup repeat again as champions? And of course, that's such an obvious question, but it also needs to be asked at the same time. Like, you have to ask that because, I mean, a lot of us grew up in the days of dynasties, whether it was the Canadians winning 4 straight in the 70s, or the Islanders winning 4 straight in the 80s, the Oilers winning 5 in 7 years, the Penguins winning back to back, the Red Wings winning back to back. You know what I mean? And it got a little dicey after that until
The Lightning,
let's see,
the Lightning.
until the Lightning. Well, yeah. Oh, well, before the Lightning, the Penguins.
Yeah.
So now it seems like 2 years in a row is considered a dynasty because it's so much
Yes,
harder. Well, because they keep
it
shuffling
is.
the deck. I mean, in the 70s and the 80s, teams had very tight control over their players, right? Like they didn't have the free agency that they have now. I mean, even like back in like the 70s, I forget the name of it, but they could just basically say, "Hey, Clemente, you did pretty good for us. We're going to extend your contract by a year." And you go, "But I don't want my contract extended by a year. I want to be a free agent so I could go somewhere else." And they said, "No, we're just going to extend your current contract by a year. Thank you for your service." And that's how they kept the players. Or eventually it would be like, well, okay, you could be an unrestricted free agent at 37, right? And then it's like, okay, who's going to sign you at 37, right? When there's a younger player willing to play presumably for less, right? So I mean, now you have UFAs at before they even hit 30. But yeah, so will the Panthers repeat, or will the Oilers make it to the finals again and win this time? I mean, I think either of those can totally play out. The Panthers seem like they got much of their core from last season, so that's possible. But then the Oilers lost a few players, they gained a few players, but they got all the big pieces are still there, and their goaltending is still kind of a question mark. But McDavid just keeps getting better somehow. In the finals, it's like he unlocked this secret hidden power, like all of a sudden, and then he's getting 4 points a game or whatever in a Stanley Cup final. I mean, pretty amazing. So I don't know. I mean, what do you think? Obviously, you want the Rangers to win, but if that doesn't happen,
Yeah,
what
so
do you have
yeah,
them
so
do?
as you were saying, the Panthers won the cup. Florida, they could become the second team this century to reach three straight finals. The Lightning did that. We just mentioned the Lightning. They did it from 2020 to 2022. Look, it's totally possible. And I do think the Western Conference may be more difficult than the Eastern. So, in that sense, the Panthers could obviously make the playoffs and then go on a run. Now, the Rangers won the President's Trophy last year, and winning the President's Trophy is becoming a curse. So, if you're the Panthers, you don't really want to get in the playoffs that way. You want to just get in the playoffs. It doesn't matter what your seed is. I mean, let's not forget they got to the finals 2 years ago as an eighth seed. So, could they do it? Yeah, I don't think they can. And I'm more bullish on the Oilers. I think it was heartbreaking Game 7. But you're right. They have all their pieces are mostly back. The goaltending is always suspect, but let's not forget last year the Oilers started out really slow and then really picked up steam. Leon Draisaitl re-signed. So McDavid Draisaitl, that's a great combo. It reminds me of Gretzky Messier, that kind of thing. Or Gretzky Curry or whatever. You have two superstars that are going to put up 100 points and more. And you're right, McDavid seems to be getting better. He's due for a cup at some point, and they got really close. I mean, just the other day in my feed, my X feed, I saw, but for whatever reason, there was a clip of him winning the Conn Smythe and then him not coming out to get it. And I was like, that must have been on his mind like the whole summer for like 4 months to be the best player in the playoffs and still not good enough to get your team over the hump. But I do think the Oilers have a better chance of getting to the finals than the Panthers. So that's what I think.
Okay.
Even though I think the Western Conference is more difficult, you have the Avalanche and the Stars are going to be really good, I think, this year. And so they're going to be more tested during the regular season, which often is better. It's better that way, as opposed to Florida, where I think their only real contender in the Eastern Conference may be the Bruins, the Rangers, and I think that's maybe the Devils. Maybe everyone's excited about the Devils because they swept the Sabres over in Czechia, but I wouldn't read too much into that. It's too early. It's too early.
I wouldn't mind seeing a rematch of last year. Listen, I like to make fun of the Oilers because it's kind of like making fun of the Maple Leafs. Like
Right.
although the Oilers, I like the Maple Leafs. I feel like just has been like bad everything from like bad management, bad whatever, right? You know what I mean? Like I kind of feel like that's more like I compare them to the Chicago Cubs, right? Like the Chicago Cubs have just like horrible ownership, horrible management. So like the Cubs lose and they're like, well, whatever. People are still going to come and watch Cub games, right? And I feel like the Maple Leafs are like the same way. Like they could sell an inferior product, but people will still go because it's
It's
the
a
Maple
brand.
Leafs.
It's
The
a brand.
Oilers,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
brand,
Yeah.
exactly, right? Like I don't know if this would apply, but win or lose, people still go to Yankees
Correct.
games,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
because they're
Right.
the Yankees, right? With the Oilers, I feel like they've been trying and they're just not quite there. And I want to see McDavid win a cup, just like I wanted to see Ovechkin win a cup,
Right.
just one. I don't need to see Ovi win five in a row. I don't really know if I liked that era of the NHL so much, and I kind of got into it at the tail end of that when I started watching hockey. I mean, it's like, oh, Montreal's in the finals and they're probably going to win, and they're going to sweep whatever team or whatever, and it's just like, that's not
Right.
exciting. That's not exciting. It's only exciting when that good team falls and you're like, oh my God, they lost. Then it's kind of exciting because it's anybody's game. But that's what makes it exciting is when it's anybody's game. So I don't necessarily want to see McDavid win 5 Stanley Cups, but I want him to win at least one. I wanted Ovi to win one. I wanted Stamkos to win one. Stammy won two. Like you have these like greats, especially with like McDavid and Crosby, Ovechkin. Like those guys need to win, just like Lemieux needed to win a cup. Just like when we saw Steve Yzerman and we go, man, is he ever going to win a cup? Like just one of the all-time greats, and you're like, is he ever going to? And then he finally does, and then you feel good for him. So yeah, hockey needs that. You can't have like one of the best players of all time not win a Stanley Cup. And the thing is that the greats always find a way because they usually are the way. Like you put McDavid on any team, and that team's chances of winning a Stanley Cup have just gotten better. So now it's up to the Oilers to build a good team around them, and it looks like that's what they've been trying to do. And yeah, if they win this year, I wouldn't be disappointed. Like, oh, went to Edmonton and not whoever. I want to see good hockey. That's what I really want to see. I mean, we want our home team to win, but you know what? If that ain't happening, we want to see good
Yeah, and I
hockey.
think I agree, and I think the hobby wants McDavid to win as well because his stuff is already worth good money, and it would consolidate him as sort of one of the greatest hockey players of all time, of our era, and then also in the hobby, he would be, in a higher upper echelon. I mean, I'm a believer that you have to win at least one championship to be considered among the greats. I really do. I know that, and ultimately, hockey's a team sport. It's not just about individual awards. You can win MVP every year, and that's great, but it's just not enough. I agree. One's enough. You don't need to win five. It doesn't, after a while, it doesn't matter. And also McDavid's getting old enough. And unfortunately, he was ahead of his time and that he was ahead of his team. The Oilers took them years to catch up, to build a supporting cast good enough. And we still talk about the Oilers, we talk about goaltending being not good. Like we're still talking about that 5 years later. Like just go out and spend the money, get a really good goalie. Like this is not hard, you know. Some teams have two great goalies. Like, and it's just unbelievable to me that they haven't been able to, because in the playoffs you need a hot goalie, right? And they had a goalie that was good last year, but he was hot and cold, and that was part of the problem too. And when you get in cold, and in the finals, it's not good. And the Panthers almost suffered that fate too because they were so evenly matched. But a rematch would be amazing. But just seeing the Oilers get going to the finals again would I think would be exciting.
So speaking of goalies, I wanted to talk about the Jeremy Swayman contract signing with the Boston Bruins because that was such a big story. He was holding out. Everybody knows this story, anybody who knows hockey, but just for those who maybe haven't been paying to all attention to all the details, Jeremy Swayman, goaltender for the Bruins, was part of a great tandem last year. It was him and Linus Ullmark. A couple of years before that, Ullmark won the Vezina as the best goalie in the league. Well, last year, Swayman kind of became the one. They'd alternated starts. So they were pretty much, one and one, right? But I guess the Bruins just decided, like they said, hey, you know what? Maybe we don't need to have two number one goalies. Because if you're playing one goalie 41 games and the other one goalie 41 games, minus injuries or whatever, right? Like you're tying up a lot of salary on goaltending, but you can only play one goalie in a game, really. You don't alternate them like you do centers, where you want to have two good centers, right? So we trade away Olmark, and that frees up some salary, maybe gets us some assets or whatever that could help us with scoring or whatever need they thought they needed to be addressed. But Swayman was he was a restricted free agent. So the Bruins could sign him, or they could trade him, but then he'd still have to sign with the other team. The problem was is that they didn't really have another option after Swayman because they traded that other option. They traded Allmark. So then it became a stalemate, right? And Cam Neely came out and said, "Oh, well, we offered him," basically said, "I could give you 64 reasons." I think he meant $64 million, but 64 reasons why Swayman should sign with us or whatever. And then Swayman's agent is like, "Oh, that's the first time we heard of that offer," right? Like that was never told to us before. So it became kind of like this showdown between Swayman and Swayman's agent against Cam Neely and the Bruins and Don Sweeney of the Bruins. So it's like, yeah, so he finally signs a deal, 8 years, $66 million, $8.25 million per season. I'm going to bungle the quote, so I'm paraphrasing here, but I believe Swayman said something along the lines of redefining the goaltending market or something like that. Do you remember hearing something like that, or
No,
did I
I
get
don't remember
misread that?
that. I don't know what that means. Oh, I see the goalie market meaning for goalies in general. Like he's right, like he's
Right.
Kurt Flood now or something. You know?
Right? It's kind of like, when like a player, well, I mean, like I'll give you like a for instance, again, this is going back 30 years because I'm old, but I remember when Eric Lindros signed his entry-level deal with the Flyers as a rookie, and I forgot what it was, but whatever the Flyers signed him to was more than what the Kings were paying Gretzky. So then the Kings quickly like
It's like, yeah,
renegotiated Gretzky.
it's like a trailblazing deal in a way. Yeah.
Right. But it has
Yeah.
that ripple
Yeah.
effect, right? And I got a couple thoughts on that, but I want to know what you think of this, how this is unfolded, or what you think of this deal.
I'm a big believer that, maybe it's an old school thought, but I do think having two goalies that split the season in half, I think they didn't need Olmark and Swayman. They didn't need both of them. They're both great goalies who should start. I mean, look at the Rangers. They have Shesterkin, and then he plays the bulk of the games, which has worked for NHL teams forever. So that's fine. The fact that it came down on the wire was, it literally happened a couple of days before the season started, is too close to call, obviously. But I think Swayman could be the best American goaltender in the league, and wouldn't surprise me if he makes the U.S. team at this point because I think he is one of the better goalies. And look, as a backup, they have Corpusalo, so not a bad understudy there. Now I do agree that this may be one of those deals that redefines, what future goalies make. But I couldn't help but think when I saw the dollar amount and the years, I couldn't help but think of the name Roberto Luongo. And so like I'm also worried about super long deals. Now I get goalies tend to be more consistent and tend to stay in one place, but if he gets hurt, they're gonna have to go into the minor league system and pull somebody, and or make a deal or something for somebody, and that's gonna be tough. And the Bruins are a contender, right, for the Stanley Cup. I put them in my top 10. I think of team that could contend for the title. And 2 years ago, they won the President's Trophy. They have lots of offense. It's a good team. And the fact that they had this question mark going into the final week before the final week of preseason is kind of not good in terms psychologically. I'm sure a lot of the players were kind of concerned that what are we going to do here? But no, in the end of the day, I think it's going to be a good deal for them, and hopefully he stays healthy and they can get a lot of mileage out of him because trust me, he's going to earn every dollar of that, I think.
So let's talk about redefining this goaltending market.
But before you do that, we did talk a few weeks ago about like the top 10 or 20 players who make the most in the league. I don't think goalies were even on that list. So maybe this is one of those deals that does catapult a player like a goaltender into a, you know, I'm not saying you'd pay the same as for a center that you would a goalie, but why not, right? So yeah, yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right. Well, yeah. So all right. So, and just a couple other details. So, yeah. So it's an eight-year contract. Goes from 24-25 this season to 2031-32. A no movement clause kicks in 26-27 and continues until 29-30. And then after that, it's a 10-team trade list in the final 2 years, which I think is interesting. It's like they can't trade a player after they sign them, but it looks like they can, unless I read Puckpedia wrong, it looks like they can trade him next year. Not that they would, But I don't know. Like, it seems that, like, when you have a player on this long-term contract and then you can't move them or trade them, they can at the end, which kind of makes sense. I mean, of course, there's also buyouts and stuff like that. But anyways, so Jeremy Swayman's got a pretty good deal here. Pun intended, no pun intended, whatever, because, it's a lot of money, but also he can't be traded, or he has to approve a trade, or he can give the list of teams that he will allow himself to be traded to towards the end of that contract. And then at the end of that contract, he's going to be 33, which is still prime time. I wouldn't say it's young for a goalie, but it's prime time. You'd agree 25 to 35 seems to be kind of
Yeah,
like that nice swath. I mean, if you're a legend like Waugh or Brodeur, you could play, late 30s, early 40s and
right.
still be competitive, right? And then, or if you're just like a wonder kid like Tom Barrasso at 18 can come in and just like, you
Sure.
know,
Yeah.
play excellently, right? So, but 33, that's good. So I wanted to look now. If somebody's just walked up to me and said, "Hey, who are the best goalies in the league?" I'd be like, Shesterkin, Vasilevsky, Bobrovsky, Hellebuck.
I would have added Allmark maybe to that list, maybe.
Okay, but Allmark, he's kind of out of the
Right.
equation. Well, I guess I could have looked
Yeah.
into
But
Allmark
but
because,
but
but
but, but I know what
but
you
he's
mean. Like, right.
so Shesterkin is making 5.6 million a year. I was surprised that he wasn't making
Hmm.
more. And his contract expires this year at the end of the season. He's going to be 32. So then I look at Andrei Vasilevsky. Vasilevsky's making 9.5 million. And that expires in 27-28. He'll be 33. So he's not the one that this contract's being redefined for.
Correct. He's been around too long and he's won a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, same with Sergei Bobrovsky. Bobrovsky's making 10 million a year. He's in the sixth year of a seventh year deal. He'll be 37. Obviously 10 million looked too much for Bobrovsky last year.
Right.
So I mean, he was good, but not $10 million
No.
good. So then I had to start digging. And I'm like, all right, so who are some of the better younger goalies, right? So, all right, Hellebuck is actually at 8.5 million. He's in the first year of a 7-year deal. He's 31. He'll be 38 when that expires. Hellebuck's getting paid. He's getting paid more than what Swayman's getting. So obviously that's incentive for Swayman to want to get paid in that $8 million neighborhood. But then I looked at some of the younger guys, right? Like Alexander Georgiev, currently in the third year of a $3.4 million deal. He's going to be 29 when that expires at the end of the season. Georgiev has the most wins of any goalie over the past 2 seasons. He had the most wins last season. He was tied for the most wins the season before. He's a good goalie. He's a great, is he a great, he's going to be 29. Look at Jake Ottinger. Now there's a good one, right? Ottinger is in the final year of his contract. He's making $4 million. He's going to be 26 when that expires, and he'll be a restricted free agent. And then rounding out just that list, I just went on NHL.com, looked at some of the goaltending leaders over the last couple of years. UC Saros, $5 million a year. He's in the fourth year. He'll be 30. He'll be an unrestricted free agent. So now I think about the signing isn't necessarily going to help the Shesterkins or the Bobrovskys or the Hellebucks because they're already set. It's going to help this new, I don't want to say younger breed
It's
because I mean Saros is going to be 30, but still for a
no,
goalie
but
that's
I
pretty
agree. It's going to help. No one 30 plus is going to help. It's going to help guys that we don't even know their names yet. Maybe it's going to help those people that are 25 on the young end of that spectrum we're talking about. Now, the interesting thing about this list is that they make less than skaters, but they're all in their 30s or 30 plus because that's when these goalies really hit their prime. So it will help, I think, going forward. But some of these, I think, winning will also help you. Like Vasilevsky, like he's won a lot, and that's probably why he's making good money. Or if you're, Shesterkin, you're in a big market team like the Rangers, they're going to pay. I don't know. I don't know that suddenly this one contract is going to redefine what people pay for the goaltender position because goaltenders have always been important, to a team, and it may. But if he has a terrible year this year, and the Bruins are terrible, let's say, he's going to set things back. It's not going to go forward. People are going to be like, "Oh, look, this is Roberto Luongo all over again." Like you give him a long deal, lots of money, and then it peters out. It doesn't sustain itself. And so I think the verdict on this is we have to wait like a year and see what happens.
Oh, obviously, yeah. And I mean, at the time of Luongo's signing, it probably looked like a good
Yeah, the
idea.
time it's yeah, yeah, at that time, sure, but quickly it became a thing that we talk about to this day as being like it's sort of a contractual fiasco in terms of why would you give anyone a contract that long for that much money, and will he be able to fulfill it all? And the truth is no.
We all can agree the worst goaltender contract signing of all time was Rick DiPietro for that 15-year deal
Yeah,
that the Islanders are
yeah,
still paying
yeah.
off.
That's yeah. I mean, 15 years. Like that's a lot. That's really a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
this is not that, but this is a long contract. And look, if you're the Bruins, you were in a tough spot. You traded off Olmark. You have two great goalies, and now they found themselves with no goalie. Basically, it was like, oh, we don't even have one great goalie now. It's like when you walk a tightrope and they remove the net underneath, and you're like, okay, if we make a mistake, this is bad. And so they had to make a deal. I think the leverage was in Swayman's camp, not for the Bruins.
Oh, it was
Yeah,
all in his
yeah, he
camp.
had the leverage,
Absolutely.
and he,
I
and he
mean,
took
yeah.
advantage of it. And good for him because players are often underpaid. I don't they get paid a lot of money, and compared to regular everyday people, but compared to what the teams are worth and what the owners make and everything, that's why the players have a union. This is why the players are always fighting because they want to get their fair share, and they know once they're locked in for 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, whatever it is, they're locked in, and the team can go up and down, and their value it affects their value. So good for him for getting what he deserves for now. Look, he's a great goalie. I have no doubt this is going to work out. I think this will be a good thing because I do think that he's a great goalie. Like I said, he might end up becoming a starter on the U.S. team. If not, he'll make the Olympic team for sure. And we'll see how it goes. But I think a lot of these fortunes rest on whether your team then it's a team sport. Can the team then do well? And he's going to get the lion's share of the playing time for sure. He's going to be playing 60 games, 55 games for sure.
Number one goaltenders like that, they need to play a lot of games. I mean, goalies want to play
Right.
every game. I don't think that's a good
Yeah.
idea because the workload is different than what it was, 50 years ago.
But even 30 years ago,
But now you look at that, like a playoff schedule could be 28 games and a season is 82 games. And they're talking about making it 84 games and reducing the preseason, which I think is a bad idea. But so they keep adding more games, right? So it's like you can't play all those games. I mean, the body needs to rest, right? Especially when you have back-to-back games or you have 4 games in 7 days or
yeah.
whatever. It's too much, and like goaltending just makes goalies do a lot of things that are unnatural for the body, the way they like fall down.
Well, especially these goalies today as opposed to 30 years ago. That's true. So,
Right, where it was just stand up, maybe you fall down, you drop to your knees, you get back
right.
up, right? So the goalies are going to want to play 60 games a season, and they should. I think that's like a good number, 55 to 60. Yeah.
I'll give you an example. The 94 Rangers that won the Cup, Mike Richter played in 68 games during the regular season. That's a lot.
Hmm.
That's not going to happen today. That's a lot. That's over almost 4,000 minutes. That's a lot. That's a lot.
Right.
And that's
Yeah,
not
that is a lot. And that's just regular
That's regular
season.
season. That doesn't include the playoffs where he ended up playing, whatever. I think he started every game but two, or started every game, and whatever Glenn Healy, his backup at the time, got some time. But yeah, that's not happening today. So yeah, you have to kind of manage. In the NBA, they call that load management. Where players get days off, and a lot of the older timers are like, "Look at these guys today; they're not playing." Michael Jordan played with one leg and with the flu, and look at these guys. But look, there's just more games, more teams, more travel. It's a little bit different today than it was 30 years ago.
Yeah. So, anyways, good for Swayman. Will be interesting to see how the Bruins do. They're a team I'd also like to see them succeed. Even though, again, I like to make fun of some of these teams sometimes, but like, I think that's just good natured fandom. In the end, like I said, I want to see good hockey. I want to see good hockey, great hockey. I want to see the greats win. Connor Bedard. I know we brought him up earlier, but another question you always got to ask of the rookie of the year: are they going to have that sophomore slump or that second year jinx or whatever they call it? I've heard sophomore slump. I've heard that term a million
Yes.
times. Great rookie season. so second year. I mean, you could chalk up that first season maybe sometimes to beginner's luck. Not really, because players work hard to get to where they are. But also, when you've never played against a guy and you don't know how to defend against the guy, and they're new, like when a rookie scores his first goal in like his first game or maybe the second game, and the goalie was like, "Well, I've never seen this guy before. I didn't know if he was going to fake or pass or shoot." You know what I mean? Like you don't know, you don't know how to handle that, right? And I think once you play in the league for a year, then your competition knows kind of maybe a little bit how to defend against you. I'm not necessarily saying that's a thing here with Bedard. I know like some projections, 30 goals, 40 goals. I mean, yeah, he could do it. I think he could do 80 points. He could be easily a point per game player. I mean, he was last year
Yeah.
pretty much. I mean, that's not really
He had
saying
he had
anything
he had a
insightful.
slight injury, so he was out for a bit. But you're right, he's about a point a game player already. So this is my thought on him. It definitely helps for your career and for the hobby and everything else for you to have a great rookie year and then maybe have a softer second year and then a good third year, a good fourth year. It's about being consistent. Players who then, like a Lafreniere, who get really good in their third or fourth year, that's almost too late. People are like, "Oh yeah, that guy's no good," which is not true. Sometimes you need to work, get into the position. Now Bedard was lucky that he played in a team that is in rebuilding mode. He got a lot of minutes, which is good. The team is
Mhm.
getting better. They're getting more pieces along the way. Can they make the playoffs? I don't think so, but it doesn't matter. They're going to get better year to year, and he's going to get better. I mean, look, I went to a Rangers Blackhawks game last year, and he's a fast skater. But Adam Fox and these other defensemen on the Rangers, they had him tied up in knots. They're knocking him down. He was little last year. He's already thrown some punches. I mean, I know that the basically the bench is clear at that point. It was fun to see Bedard get into it a little bit, and I do think that he's getting more confidence. Like you said, the more you play, the more they get to know you. But I also think he's got confidence. And I do think he's going to be a point the game player. Like you said, it's not saying much. I think he'll get that. The key is to stay healthy, like every good player. Stay healthy. Don't miss 20 games or whatever he missed last year. But stay healthy, and I think he's going to build on what he's doing. And I think he's destined to be one of the better players. He's a great athlete, phenomenal skater, great shooter. Yeah, they know him, but there's some things they can't stop him from doing. They can't stop him from shooting. Like I mean, they could try, but I mean, Ovechkin is a great example of a player who does the same thing over and over again. And he keeps doing it and he keeps scoring. So, and he's only 42 goals away from Gretzky's goals record this year. So he might do it this year. Who knows? But Bedard, I think, is going to have a good season, and I think the hobby will respond, and as it has already, and before it was all hype, we've seen the product a little bit, and I think he's going to have a good season. The Blackhawks are rebuilding. It's going to take some time,
Mhm.
just like the Sharks are rebuilding, and they have a lot of young players, and they have the first draft pick in Celebrini. It will take time. They're even further behind than the Blackhawks are, but it will take time. And in 5 years, you never know. They could be in the
Yeah,
finals.
you spoke with Macklin Celebrini at the rookie
Yeah,
showcase,
yeah.
and we published your interview with him. What was he like? What was the vibe you got from
The
him?
vibe I got from him was what I get from a lot of 18-year-olds who just joined the league. They just really can't believe this is happening. But they've also, in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
they've been waiting for this moment their whole life. They've been really good since they were like kids. They've been scouted heavily since they were
Right.
like 12 and 13. And, you know, but I got a lot of Bedard vibes off of him. He's not as good as Bedard. At least that's all what the scouts are saying. Bedard has been labeled as a once in a generation type talent. You can have more than one great once in a generation. I mean, we've had Ovechkin and Crosby at the same time, and right. I mean, you have Matthews and then McDavid, and this you can have three guys at once. It's not but I think Bedard set a bit of a bar last year. It'd be interesting to see if Celebrini could be. We asked him that basically. We were like, could you have you seen Bedard and can you do you want to top that? And he was like, not gonna talk about that. He was like, look, I have my own personal goals. And look, his goal was like, I just want to get signed. He got signed. I want to get ice time. And he will because the Sharks are pretty lousy. I mean, they were terrible. They've been terrible for a while.
Mhm.
But they're rebuilding and they have a lot of young pieces coming in. And I think San Jose is a pretty exciting hockey market. And I think he was really excited about being in San Jose, which he spent a little bit of time there because his father worked in San Jose. So he played for like the Sharks junior team when he was like 14. So he knows San Jose a little bit. He's more familiar with it. I mean, when Bedard went to Chicago, the joke was like, does does he even know like what people in Chicago put on their hot dog? Like that was the joke with Bedard. Like he doesn't even know what people in Chicago eat. He's never really been to Chicago, and he adapted. But no, celebrating was really good, and I'm always impressed with how good they are with the media. I don't know if the 18-year-old me could talk to 15 writers and do one-on-one interviews and pose for photos and all that stuff. Like it's just really the maturity level is pretty astonishing. I thought that he was very mature. He sounded like he's ready mentally. And I saw him skate around and I thought he's a good skater. Fast, nice shot, like a really, really good athlete and a good guy. I got the impression he was a good guy and could be a future talent and someone who the league could, market around, just like you have Bedard and these guys. Look, there are people that go to the rookie showcase that were like, I remember when Sidney Crosby was, 18 or 20 and he was like young and shy and didn't know where the bathroom was, and then you grow into it. You grow into the role. And so these guys have to grow into the position, and it makes me feel old when we ask these guys like, hey, like who'd you watch growing up? And they're like, McDavid. I'm like, oh my, McDavid. I was like 38 or something when he started playing or something. It's like hilarious because in my mind I think like Gretzky, Lemieux, like I think my bossy. That's how old we are, and so it's just funny that when you hear stuff like that, and they'll all mention Crosby. I mean, every Canadian player mentions Crosby because he is, I think, for the younger talent, post Gretzky, he's the bar. But no, a great interview. He's a good guy, and I think San Jose will have a good season, and he'll put points up because he gets a lot of ice time. I'm sure he will.
I don't think there's going to be the same hype around his cards as there were around Bedard's cards last year. Like I'm not sensing that surge of demand for Macklin Celebrini outside of hockey collectors.
No,
Just the
agreed,
tip like
agreed.
the people who want, I collect first overall picks, I collect first round draft picks, I collect RPAs, whatever, right? Like you're still going to have that sort of thing. Like nobody's asked me for a Macklin Celebrini card, right?
Yeah,
Or at least, well, when I did the national, nobody's like, "Hey, got any
yeah,
Celebrini
no,
cards?" Like
no.
people either wanted Bedard or Fantilli because we were in
Yeah, no,
Ohio.
I agree. I agree with you that and you can tell but the demand isn't what it is because if you look at his like Canadian junior card, it's not jumping in
Hmm.
price like Bedard did because there was nothing else. Celebrini will not have that jump, but I do suspect that if he starts putting up some big numbers in the first 2-3 months of the year, and then his young guns shows up in Series 2, I can see that card going for a decent amount. Not Bedard,
Oh,
not Bedard
absolutely.
numbers, and I don't think it'll push the price of the box the way Bedard did it. I mean, the box is still going for 325. I've seen it. I'm like, really, guys? The Young Guns card's 300, so the box could come down in price. Let some of us get a box of that. So once the hype isn't, there is no hype here, but we've seen players not hyped who then become good players. Yeah, I don't know who I would compare him to because I haven't seen him really play. So I don't know, who I
Hmm.
would compare him to, but I wouldn't compare him to the great modern players that we've seen. Like I don't even think he's lucky if he's a Jack Eichel, I think. You know, I mean, if he became a Jack Eichel, that would be pretty good for him.
Hey, if I could become Jack Eichel, I'd be
Right.
pretty happy. Minus the neck injury, of course.
But Jack Eichel isn't Austin Matthews, he's not McDavid, he's not Sid, and Bedard, I think, is in that group, or is getting in that group. He's going in that group, and
Hmm.
everybody else is, I mean, we'll see. The other thing to look at too is some of these second year players like Fantilli, like you mentioned, Fantilli. He could have a breakout year. You never know, and that would be something that would definitely people would have to rush back to last year and look for his cards. But I do think that there's other players out there that take a little bit more time to mature and get more ice time, and some of those guys takes a year or two, maybe three. I mean, look at Lafreniere; it's taken him like 3 years to get really good, and I think he's a good player. But the hobby doesn't care anymore; they've moved on.
Unless he has like a crazy 2 game span like Mika
Yeah,
Zibanejad did a couple years back, and then everybody wanted his Young Guns card, or he has a 50 goal season or something, something to really,
yeah,
like when everybody was looking for like say Tage Thompson all of a
right.
sudden. Remember, like it was like, oh,
Yeah, it's
Tage
like
Thompson. It's like, yeah, he had cards 5 years
right.
ago.
No, yeah, it's
Like
it's like that stock that something goes up, but the truth is you're not gonna get that. He doesn't get ice time. He's on a third line. I don't know. It's probably not gonna happen for him unless he changes teams or suddenly gets moved up to second line or something. But as long as he's doing what he's doing now, he'll never become a hobby breakout. But could be someone who will help a team win a cup, and that's really what matters in the end for fans. For the collectors, it's a different story.
Now, rounding out our conversation, I want to touch on expansion. Actually, want to address a comment that I got via social media. Always thank you for your comments, whether it's on Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, whatever, any feedback, email. It's good, it's helpful. So, somebody wrote to me and said, heard your last podcast, not really a correction as much as the Toronto area population is almost 7 million and almost 10 million under our drive. Could be candidate for another hockey team, but lots of politics, as Tim mentioned. So, just to touch on that, I went to Wikipedia because Wikipedia is never wrong. So, when I said that Toronto had about 3 million people, I was looking at this census from 2021 that said that it had 2,794,356. So I rounded up to 3 million. Now that's just the city. But then when you add like the urban sprawl around it, yeah, then you get to, 7 million in the greater Toronto and Hamilton area. And then you get to almost 10 million, when you go further out. So what he meant is, yeah, Toronto's surrounding area, you figure all of that in, you're looking at about 10 million people. And yeah, I mean, people going to a Maple Leafs game don't just live in Toronto. So I get it, right? So he's saying that whole sprawl, you're looking at 10 million people. And yeah, I could support another team. But again, there's politics involved. I know the NHL is now not thinking about expanding. I don't want them to expand. 32 is fine. I feel like there's too many teams already. 32, that's 8 in each division. Great. We're done. Let's just make sure Utah works out. Let's just make sure that Nashville doesn't get flaky again or whatever. You know what I mean? Because it seems like every now and then there's like a trouble area. Like, oh no, this team is going to have to relocate and somebody wants to buy them and move them and this, right? Let's just be stable for a while, right? We just had a team move. And I can understand that the NHL probably just wants to let the dust settle a little bit before they kick up more dirt. But if you expand to 34 teams, then you got to expand to 36 teams.
Right. The number.
Because you got to have 9 in each
the
division.
Number, right.
And I don't know. I know this is like 25 years now, but I've never fully embraced the whole Nashville, Columbus.
Right.
Minnesota, that expansion wave, Atlanta, which Atlanta went away, to Winnipeg. But you know what I mean? Like, I never really I don't know. I kind of thought that 28 seemed like a good number, but I guess 32. All right, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, the argument in other sports was always that you dilute the talent. I don't think that's the case in the NHL, but you do saturate markets. And what I don't like is that they'll put a team in a place like Atlanta, and then they got to get rid of a team there, or they put one in Phoenix and they try to make it work, and then it doesn't work, and then it moves to Salt Lake. Okay, fine, but there's too much of that experimentation that I don't like, and I think that there's too many of these. I don't even know how many you would say, but there's like a group of teams that we could, every year we would, like Nashville, oh, will this team be around? Will they get flaky? Will they want to move? And I just don't think it's good for the league in general to be playing all these games. Now I get there's a lot of money involved here, and that's really what motivates all of this. But like we'll have a team in Salt Lake, like that's a massive experiment. We'll see how that goes. Now, markets are excited the first year a team shows up, and the second year and the third year. And then, and then if it's got staying power, we'll know. But if it doesn't, it'll disappear. It'll go somewhere else. And I don't like all these teams moving around all that much. It isn't that many teams, but it's enough for us to, especially the last 20 years, there's been a nice chunk of teams who've showed up in some place, moved or disappeared or whatever, and the idea of taking teams out of Winnipeg and Minnesota and then only to give them teams back years later,
right,
tells me that that's a failed experiment. It's like, oh, we tried. So, we never should have left Winnipeg. That was a mistake. Oops. So we should go back there. It's like, okay, but some markets are tried and true, and I like more Canadian teams. I'd love to have more Canadian teams. This reader is right. The Toronto area is big, but if you're going to go that far out, now you're including Buffalo in a way. And Buffalo has a hockey team, and Buffalo is in the Toronto TV market. So you give them a third team essentially then. And then, okay, that's fine. And New York has the 3 teams, the metro area, but we talked about the history of the New York area. It's a little different. But I don't want to go into a long discussion about expansion. It seems to be everyone's favorite topic to talk about because there's a big what if. But look, the league is going to expand because it's the way it is. There's money there, and there's somebody rich somewhere that wants to own sports teams, a franchise. So that's as long as that happens, it's like McDonald's. It's a franchise business. As long as there's money and there's locations, they will keep growing. So you see a new McDonald's show up in your neighborhood. But some of them close too. I guess that's the nature of sports. I just don't really like it that much because some cities are investing a lot of money, and some taxpayers are putting up a lot of money for what I call corporate welfare. And I don't think that's not always a good thing. Yeah, if it creates jobs, it's good, but often the studies show a lot of these are not good for business. And yeah, it builds civic pride. That's great. I'm a big sports fan myself, but you have to be smart, and we'll see what happens. But will there be another team in the Toronto area? We'll see. I'm more concerned about whether the Maple Leafs can put together a winning season and win a cup. Like that would be like, I think if you're a Maple Leafs fan, you're probably more worried about that than if a team shows up across the street.
That makes sense. All right. Well, I think that's all the things I want to talk about. This was a good episode. Oh, we should acknowledge that Tim is not here. I should have said it at the beginning of the show.
If you haven't noticed over an hour, he's not here. If you haven't noticed.
Well, no, I didn't introduce him, but it's like, oh, Tim's been awfully quiet in this episode. Yeah. He's out scouting expansion sites for the NHL in Texas right now. So he said something, he emailed me, said something about going to Austin. I just assumed he was going to see if they could support an NHL franchise in 27, 28.
Well, we'll get a full report soon.
Yeah. All right. Thank you all for listening to the Puck Junk Hockey Podcast. Keep those comments coming. I know some of you have put in requests for episode topics. We are going to honor those requests as soon as we can. Be sure to like and subscribe. You can subscribe to the newsletter at puckjunk.com/newsletter. You can support this podcast by purchasing a shirt at shop.puckjunk.com. And until next time, collect what you like.
For more hockey goodness, follow us on Twitter at PuckJunk.